Hi, Kirk. I see you. I'm going to pass you the controls. Interested to hear you were spot on your energy calls. The last.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Kirk. How are you, my trading brother?
All right.
Back.
Likewise. I have a little bit of an echo here, so I'm not sure.
You're coming through clear to me. No echo for me.
Fantastic. So how's the day?
The day's great. I want to acknowledge that you've been structurally very bullish crude oil. You made some great calls on Chesapeake and other oil issues, and here we are. We recently made new highs for the move up around 76, and interested in what your thoughts are in energy or anything else on your radar, Kirk. And we have things like sanctions going back into effect in Iran, and things still seem to be devolving there. They're shooting missiles, ballistic missiles, within a few miles of our troops in Syria, in Iraq. So, do you still believe there's going to be some conflagration before the election, or has that been pushed off? And could that be why Susan Rice resigned?
Well, I have a thesis about that, and I'll give it to you in 1 minute. Can you see my screen where it says managing your hedges?
Not yet. No, I can't see it. So you have to.
How do I?
There's a share screen drop menu. There we go. Have it.
Now you can see it?
Yep.
Excellent. So I just thought it'd be interesting because I was listening to the show here, to the presentation, and I, in September, told my folks, and I started to get them ready in August, to get ready for an October correction. And I had my reasons. A lot of my reasons had to do with a lull in buybacks, and then just a number of things coming together. But I thought it was interesting that you just mentioned a little company that I'm interested in buying, and your price target is very similar to my price target. You just mentioned Amazon at 1,600.
Yeah.
That's what we're shooting at too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Great minds, kindred spirits. So, yeah, I saw that up there too. Failure to make a new high, and a break to 1,600. You're right. It wouldn't damage the long-term uptrend.
Nope.
So, I'm using that kind of as a key for when this correction will, since it's a leader, I don't have to know what price the Nasdaq's going to bottom at. 100. All I have to do is pay attention to Amazon, and we'll see where the market's at should that objective be achieved. So interesting.
Right. So oil. So there's some things going on in oil, right?
Yeah, a lot of things.
Right, and we've talked about a lot of them. At the end of the presentation, you just give me the 1 minute or 2 minute warning. I actually have another stock for you. Okay. And I think that you guys will like it because I think it's a good option play. So, you mentioned what's going on in the Middle East. And the last time we talked, I brought up, hey, this didn't get a lot of press, but there was probably an assassination attempt on Prince Mohammed bin Salman back in like April, May. And since then, the rhetoric has continued to ratchet up. And I'm going to throw out there something for you to chew on. President Trump really has been transparent about what he wanted to achieve the last couple of years. Now, as he said things and he wobbled around and insulted people, folks weren't really sure what to make of him. And I think that by this point, whether you like him or don't like him, you have to take his goals at face value. And because he's really gone in all the directions that he said he would go, for right, for wrong, for good, or for bad.
Right. Trade, everything.
Everything. So, he's leaned on OPEC in the last couple of months to produce more oil, right? But at the same time, he's sanctioning Iran. Well, to think that he doesn't understand, as Vladimir Putin alluded to think that President Trump and the administration don't understand that they are getting over 1 million barrels a day off the market for Iran. You know, they're at about 1 million now that came off, and a few 100,000 more are going to dribble off. And that was going to raise the price of oil is kind of silly. So, you know, now we have Saudi Arabia, which announced today, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, we've replaced all of Iran's lost oil, right? So we knew that Saudi Arabia could pump this oil. We didn't worry about Iran. So why are we putting the sanctions on Iran? Because we know that Saudi Arabia will pump oil. We know that our production was going up. It's going to be flat now for a few quarters because of the pipeline issues. But this idea that Trump didn't know or the administration didn't know is kind of silly. So if that's the case, then we should ask, how serious are they about putting even more pressure on Iran? And I think the answer is pretty serious. So in the next month or two, right, last year about this time, you asked me when I thought that we'd hit a head, and I said it would be sometime this year, middle to late. Well, now we're moving into the later part of the year. I think it's very possible that you start to see even more Israeli sorties hitting Iranian targets. We already know that it's going on in Syria. I think you're going to see that move throughout the Middle East. May not be Israeli jets, may be American, to the extent that Saudi Arabia has forces for Yemen. You're going to continue to see conflict increase. At some point, there's going to be a major strike against the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. And at that point, the United States is going to make a point to the Iranian generals. Hey, we don't like the Ayatollah. You should probably pick a side. And the sides that the IRGC is going to be able to pick are either the Iranian people or to protect the mullahs and the Ayatollah when that conflict between the Iranian people and the Ayatollahs and the Ayatollah and the mullahs take place.
Where's the highest concentration of the that force, the Revolutionary Guard forces? Where's the highest? Is it in Syria?
Syria, yeah, for sure Syria, but also in Iraq and
Okay.
you know, you have their mercenaries in Yemen,
Right.
but also the Straits of Hormuz, right? And you got in the Straits there, you have those little speedboats all over the place, and we haven't wiped them out yet. It would take all of an afternoon to just wipe out the Iranian Navy. So, you know, this idea that our ships are afraid of speedboats, no. I mean, I just went to 2 Navy museums and I saw what we were using in World War II, and that's enough firepower to wipe those guys out. Imagine what we have now, and you don't have to imagine. Go online, you can see it. It'd be very simple for us to go in there and just wipe out their Navy and say, okay, guys, think about, do you want to be more like the Egyptian army, a protector of the people, or do you want to be more like some other, like the Chinese army, and be an oppressor of the people?
Which way do you think they're going to go, buddy?
I think that it's incredibly highly likely that they choose to be like the Egyptians. If they choose the other direction, you know, then you might actually get into an all-out war in Iran. But I really think that the direction that we're headed is to support and manipulate and provide some support through special forces and diplomacy. I think it's just going to be a revolution, right? Okay. I don't think you're going to see foreign powers go into Iran, but I think you're going to see the people who have really been pushing back on the Ayatollah and the mullahs, and now with some economic pressure on them, they'll push harder. And the IRGC is going to have to pick a side.
So without the potential for the straits being blocked, if it goes the peaceful regime change way, what's going to be the catalyst for oil over $100?
Well, I mean, I don't think it'll be entirely peaceful, right? I mean, as soon as you start firing in the Straits and the Iranians drop all their mines, you're still going to have a 2 or 3 week period where probably not a lot of oil moves through there. And the shock value, right? The shock value will drive the price of oil up. But really, that's on top of the supply and demand equation in oil, which has really gotten very, very tight. So if we're under the impression that Iranian oil doesn't come back onto the market for a year or 2 or 3, right? Because I think that things happening this fall makes sense, but there's another scenario where this gets put off until Trump is running for re-election. So, it's hard to narrow down the time frame, but the supply-demand equation for oil is tight for the next few years. Until there's a recession, you're really going to have a tight oil supply to the demand because the investment in offshore drilling has been so low. Now, that will eventually change as well because countries like Guyana and Brazil and Angola and countries that have to have oil income or at least cheap oil are going to really start, doing a lot of drilling for just a few years in the 2020s. And at that point, whether it's 2025 or 2030, when all the things come together for EVs and the last big oil investment, then you'll have oil fall off a cliff at some point in the next 7 to 15 years. But
well,
between now and then,
don't you think that just $100 oil or higher brings about exactly what you said? Brings about a global recession. I mean, especially countries like India. I mean, that's why their currency's under pressure. They import all of their oil, so so does Japan.
Right.
Don't you think that it's plus consumers that are so happy right now may not be as happy with $5 gas again or higher? Isn't that what could be the catalyst to precipitate higher rates, higher energy prices?
Right.
Equals recession?
I think that we'll sniff $100 oil, but I don't think it'll be sustained.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the Saudi Arabians are, and I wrote, and this is why I have this article up and this article up. I talked about this all before. The shift in oil production is away from other countries and towards Saudi Arabia, with the United States having experienced most of our growth, right? Our oil production has about doubled in the last decade. It's not going to double again, right? Harold Hamm is out of his mind if he's, right, the guy who took his hedges off at $80, 4 or 5 years ago. Great wildcatter, but he doesn't understand the long-term supply dynamics. He doesn't understand that Saudi Arabia has been manipulating this the whole time. Saudi Arabia is going to be for the swing producer here, right? Saudi Arabia will provide just enough oil to make sure that the price of oil doesn't spike too much. So we're at that, what I called several months ago. I called it, right? I talked about this golden age for stocks, and it's not on this chart, but I called it the Goldilocks price of oil. The Goldilocks price of oil is basically where we are now, right? It's not high enough to stunt economic growth, but it is high enough for all the producers to make money. So as an investor, you want to be in certain oil stocks. You want to be in companies that are lean, that have high margin assets, don't have a lot of legacy debt, don't have assets that are probably going to die on the vine. So, I stay away from the majors. Total's the only one that I really play with. But you want some of these really high-end shale plays. And if you could, you'd want to invest in Saudi Arabia, but of course, their IPO has gotten pushed off again.
Okay. All right. So kind of have your feel for what's going on in oil and your downside targets. You were looking for a correction in the market in October. You have any view on midterms and how that may affect some of the markets that you're involved in?
Well, I actually think that there's a very good chance that if the Democrats get the Senate, 'cause I think it's a foregone conclusion that they get the House. If they don't get the House, I'd be shocked. I think
Okay.
they'll get the House by 20 or 30 seats. But the Senate, that's up in the air. Could stay the same. They could lose a seat. They could gain 2 or 3. Who knows? But if the Democrats do end up getting 51 seats in the Senate and the House by 20 or 30, you could see something monumental. President Trump has already said, why can't we just put everybody on Medicare? And the gentleman who runs Newsmax, which is a good buddy of Trump, has said we should just put everybody on Medicare. And I agree with that. Now, I don't believe in the free, this idea that everybody's going to have free health care is garbage. It's not going to be that way. It'll be a hybrid system like Medicare operates now if they do it. I think that you could see Trump move in that direction. And if he does, that'll trigger the bear market in healthcare that I see coming. I don't know when the bear market in healthcare starts, but
Because they've been high flyers, haven't they, Kirk?
Yeah, and
you're going to have quite a laundry list of healthcare companies to look to be short.
Yeah, and United Healthcare will be the first one. So
Okay.
I mean, if you take
That's
a look
interesting.
at, oh yeah, I mean, I've written articles on United Healthcare, and boy have I gotten mocked, but because the darn thing just keeps going up, right? I mean, I
Okay.
told people to start thinking about shorting it in here,
Right.
and it just kept going up. Take a look at this chart since Obamacare started. Obamacare here. Look at that chart.
Yeah.
And it's because, and then I'll put that into context, right?
Yeah. Parabolic.
Does this make any sense?
No. It looks like Amazon did.
That's right. And United Healthcare doesn't have that kind of sustainability. At some point, this is going to fall off a cliff. The catalyst will be when we get serious about controlling healthcare costs. The reason why Medicare for All makes sense, people go, oh man, it's the government. It's not the government. Does anybody even know how Medicare works anymore? There's different regions in the country, and they're for bid contracts.
I'm on it, and I don't know.
Yeah, Medicare is run by Blue Cross Blue Shield in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So, the reality is that it's not really run by the government. There's government oversight and rules, but once the whole country's on Medicare, now you get the employers out of that game, and they save a ton of money, and the employers are happy. You can negotiate for drugs, and now you can negotiate for healthcare. Everything's on one system called the DRGs. So diagnostic related groups, which I think they may have changed the name of actually, but there's a whole system for controlling the costs. And Medicare has been very, very good for that. You talk to somebody on Medicare and ask them, would you like to give up your Medicare and go on private insurance? Nobody says yes. But at the same time, most people with an income buy their own supplement. And if you go to Costa Rica or Switzerland or a number of other countries, it's basically the core coverage for healthcare that you don't make a profit on, and you really shouldn't because it's monopoly priced. Just like utilities, right? You don't have a substitute for healthcare, therefore you have to regulate pricing. But you give people a supplement and you say, okay, you have to go buy your own supplement. Now you can customize it and the companies can make money. Plus they have the 4-bid contracts. Will you end up with 5 to 10 insurance companies across the country? Sure. But you see what having 100 has done, nothing. So I think that the big surprise that I would throw out there is that President Trump might cooperate with the Democrats to fix healthcare if the Democrats win in November.
That's interesting. Kirk, you're an equity guy, and we're starting to enter this period where tax selling begins to take hold. People start planning, what worked, what didn't work. And I also know that have a good eye for value and undervaluation. And so you watch everything, even commodities with your views on oil. I was wondering if you had a view on things that are cheap, and what is cheap. I don't think, and I think they'll get cheaper. are mining stocks. Do you have any view on? I don't think gold has bottomed yet. I don't think silver has bottomed yet. You know, gold could go to 1,100. Who knows? But do you have any view? And are they cheap on a historical basis compared to the price of gold? Do you
So
have a view?
yeah, I do. Interestingly, a couple of weeks
Oh, yeah,
before,
Coeur d'Alene.
yeah,
Okay,
so I like core mining because they're mainly silver, right?
right.
And our bottom fishing price on that one was $7 a share. It's
Okay,
actually in the fives. I think it's a great buy right now.
okay.
Um, I think that Barrick Gold, who did they just merge
That's a
with?
blue chip.
Newmont?
Yeah.
Yeah. Barrick was one that I've liked for a long time, and I was looking for opportunities to get in. We bought, our speculative folks, our people a little bit more aggressive. We're buying
Yeah.
Barrick a couple of weeks before that merger.
Right.
So, I think that gold, the price that I keep telling people on gold to watch for is about 1050, 1060. I saw that you
Okay.
guys mentioned 1120. I think you're splitting hairs in there. You guys are traders, so that granularity is much more important to you. Um, for me, I tie the precious metals into the whole crypto thing, right? So the cryptocurrencies have contributed to gold and silver, not really being the fear place.
Because they're
However,
getting the money flow going towards crypto instead of dropping a gold bar on your foot.
absolutely. I told people, and Cody Willard has been on this too. We've been talking about it for a year that crypto was going to crash. And I tell a story about a kid who I used to coach for baseball. He's 24-ish or 25-ish. And he says, "Hey, what do you think of cryptocurrencies?" And I said, "I think most of them will go to zero." I said, "You'll have a few survivors. Keep an eye on who ends up, incorporated into the banking system."
How much longer for that process? Because you think about another 3, 4 years, and your metaphor is kind of like the dot-com bubble, where
Yeah.
out of the bubble there were a few champions that rose from the ashes. And um, any idea price-wise where you think Bitcoin could go? I think that's going to be one of the last man standing. I think some of the majors, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin.
Right. Yeah, Bitcoin will get into the hundreds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
Bitcoin will
that's
get
going to
into the
take some
hundreds, but
time.
but, but they'll survive.
Okay.
Ether, I think same sort of scenario. The winners, the winners in cryptocurrency, of which it'll be three, four, five, six maybe, are going to lose 90%.
Okay.
Everybody else is going to go to zero. That's how
Wow, that's
bad.
a big call.
Yeah,
That's a
and
big call.
and and gold and silver will make a comeback probably right after or starting during the next recession, because ultimately, as I've talked about, we're going to get helicopter money. I don't know when the helicopter money hits, sometime in the 2020s. But as Gunluck and Drunken Miller and everybody else are pointing out, right? I mean, this isn't hard to point out this problem. There's too much damn debt on the planet. And at some point, you have to decide, do you make the middle class pay for this debt? Or do you go to the bondholders and you just say, hey, we're devaluing you by 50%? And that's
Are
what's
you
going to
worried?
happen.
You bring up debt. I've read some interesting stories that the black swan, a lot of people are looking at sovereigns, treasuries, and global sovereigns. But the biggest bubble in the debt market has been corporate debt. And they've used that money not for improving the company, but for financial engineering. So they've basically leveraged up what they borrowed through buybacks and dividends. So they end up owning whatever, they borrowed money for. They own something. If it starts to deteriorate in price and rates are going up to roll over that debt, kind of sounds like a nasty recipe.
You don't say. Like maybe the buyback bubble will end badly.
Yeah, because a lot of the corporate borrowing is for buyback programs.
Right. So I have been on this since March, and actually with subscribers a little earlier.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So I talked about this in a more
I could
recent
bring up
article.
anything, and you have an article for it.
Well,
You're prolific. You're a
just
prolific writer, Kirk.
I just do this for fun. I'm just the biggest nerd in the world. The only thing that keeps me from going 100% nerd is the fact that I like baseball. So if it wasn't for baseball, I'd be 100% nerd. And here I'm going to show you a more recent article.
And I have a question from our community. Do you have any opinion about Jamal Khashoggi's assassination in Saudi Arabia's embassy in Turkey?
That's the journalist, correct?
Yeah. Is that you, Kirk?
Yeah, there you go. Here's me geeking out. See, pretty big nerd, right?
Where are you?
That was in D.C.
Okay.
I did a big. I just traveled the country 3,700 miles. If you're a baseball fan, I tell you what. I don't know what happened there, but if you're a baseball fan, go to St. Louis. And I hate to say that as a Milwaukee guy. St. Louis keeps beating us. This year we beat them, but Busch Stadium. My God, one of the I don't know why it goes upside down.
Better than Wrigley Field?
Oh my God, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Wrigley's an experience, right? I've been there a bunch of times. Wrigley, you go for the neighborhood experience. But Busch here, I've been to 19 baseball stadiums. Man, I hate to say that this is one of the 2 or 3 best, but it is. There's no doubt about it. So in any case, I drove 3,700 miles this fall around the Midwest and the East Coast to kind of see the lay of the land. I went back to Beaver County, Pennsylvania, because I broke down there in 2009 to check it out. And nothing had been done, and the whole city still is sleepy. And the old Mr. Belvedere area, the TV show with Bob Uecker.
Right.
And I went there. There's 3 brand new buildings in the last decade since I was first there. You know what they are? A housing project, a assisted living facility for for people who are on Title 19, and a social services office. There is no new industry, no new business, nothing.
Huh.
And so I've actually
sounds like a nice place to live.
It's actually
if you're tired of the masses, like I become in San Diego.
It's actually, I have a ton of pictures on my website, but it's actually a beautiful place. But you look back into yesterday, and the reason I do these drives is kind of see America from the ground up. I'll tell you what, I understand why.
Man.
It's Philip Fisher, right?
Yeah.
Get the scuttlebutt.
Right.
And so that's what I try to do. I'll just tell people out there, I dive into the macro, which takes me into the politics. I understand why people in Pennsylvania voted for President Trump. That state got left behind by the economic
new economy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so I actually contacted Jeff Bezos by Twitter, and I laid out a case for they should put Amazon 2 headquarters outside of Pittsburgh, because it would do the most good. It would really be good for that corridor from Cleveland to Pittsburgh. He'd still have access to the East Coast. I don't know why anybody wants to build on the East Coast. The weather events are going to get more serious. It's too densely populated as it is. 1 million people ought to move out of New York tomorrow and just fill out the middle of the country. There's just so many things that we're doing wrong that it wouldn't take much to fix, but for whatever reason, there's no political will. We're hoarding people into the cities. I mean, I hope that that's not some duplicitous plan, but you take a look at this stuff, and from the corporations behaving badly to oil prices going up to too much debt. Ultimately, there's going to be another crisis. I don't know when. I'm guessing the 2020s. And we're going to have to make a decision. Do we go back and for the 4th freaking time try tax cuts for the rich, trickle-down economics, and popping up the banks? Or are we going to build from the bottom up? because this top-down stuff, I'm telling you, we're about to fail for the third time since Ronald Reagan, and it's not going to be pretty. And for your traders, and this is a point that I'm getting to, I'll tell you what, I'm already doing pretty well again. I had that bad year in 2015, house burnt down, injuries, you know, perfect storm of bad investments, and I'm kind of kicking ass again. And I'll tell you what, the day is going to come, and I don't know when it is exactly. I can tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, right? Famous Warren Buffett quote. When this economy turns over, if you're short, you're going to become very, very, very rich because it's not going to drop 30 or 40%, right? This little correction we're having now, it's something to buy because there's $400 billion, right? There's $400 billion. If I can find you the article, I'll show it to you, that are about to come back into the market.
Because of the tax law and repatriation?
Yeah, so
okay.
I don't know exactly where. I have it somewhere, but there you go. Fourth quarter outlook. This one's actually.
So this is how we get this pullback and another blow off into the end of next year or something like that.
Right.
You know, like S&P 4,000, something like that.
Right. If you want a really good article, read this one, my fourth quarter macro and market outlook. We maybe should have spent more time on this, but I cover the whole buyback thing. We're going to get a huge rally at the end of the year, and maybe going into next year, because there's $400 billion of authorized buybacks that haven't been used yet.
Okay.
It's all coming in.
What a great point. And you wanted me to remind you when we were near the end about a stock recommendation you were going to make.
All right. So we're going to talk about Encana for 1 minute.
I've been following it.
Yeah, why we're going to talk about Encana? Because Shell loves them. Shell is, if I can find it, highlighted. Here you go. Shell is going to put all their money into the Permian and Canada's Duvernay Basin. Who is huge in those two spots? Encana. Also, Shell is in the Montney, and Encana is in the Montney. Shell wants to expand in North America because they know that the offshore stuff is going to be sketchy, especially with some of these countries having to drill out of necessity. And they want to be here. Encana is the perfect asset for them. It is so cleaned up financially and so focused on the assets that Shell wants. I think Shell's going to buy them. Now, I could be wrong about that. However, you know,
the chart pattern is interesting to me if you just draw a straight line off the highs at, 1375 or so, and then go back to 3. It's an ascending triangle, which a breakout over those highs would measure $23 or so, buddy.
Yeah, low 20s is what we're looking at. I think it's going to get bought out for around 20. I was buying in here, I was buying in here, and I'm buying again here. And I'll tell you what, I told you this about Chesapeake. Chesapeake has doubled since we talked about it.
Yeah, great call.
Still have a lot of that position and the leaps, because I think that this winter is going to be I've got a weather forecaster who's a subscriber who's telling me this is going to be a cold winter out east. So that means the price of natural gas is going to go up. We have the pressures on oil. The highly leveraged company like Chesapeake, which was beat to hell, is probably going to go up to $6, $7, $8 a share. I think that one's going to keep going up. But this one's a low risk company. These guys aren't in debt. I mean, these guys are churning out free cash flow. They had a dividend. They're doing a buyback. They're very focused. You take a look at this company fundamentally, and it's probably going to run to 20 by itself. I think Shell's going to buy them for around 20. If oil spikes up, here's where your asymmetry comes in. If I'm wrong and oil doesn't stay between 70 and 100 long term, and it goes above 100, or it gets to 100, 110, 120, and it settles in that range instead of that 70, 80, 90 range, the upside for a lot of these companies is huge, and nobody really bigger than these guys. Their Permian assets, they have takeaway. And that's important, right? There's takeaway for some companies, no takeaway for other companies. That's why companies that can't get their oil out of the Permian aren't experiencing a big boom. So these guys, I tell you what, if you want to buy leaps like January 2020, if that's if that's too long a date for some of you folks, I get it. But I like the leaps, the 2020 leaps, huge. I think you can make 3, 4, 500% in a year. You know,
Okay.
I don't think there's a lot of people who would argue not wanting to make that money.
All right. Well, what another great presentation, Kirk. And we covered a lot of ground. I want to thank you again for coming here and opening my eyes to a few things I wasn't paying attention to. And thank you very much, my trading warrior brother. Have a great fall investing trading season, and let's get back together in the winter and see how things are progressing. And I appreciate your insights that you provide to me and to the F.A.C.E community. Thank you, Kirk.
Yeah, thank you very much. And hey, to all your baseball neutral folks,
Yeah.
if you're not a Dodger fan, throw a little love out there for the Brewers.
All right, buddy. And Shots Brewery and Laverne and Shirley and Squiggy and Lenny.
There you go, all of them.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much, Kirk.
Yep.
You could follow Kirk at Kirk Spanos on Twitter, and he does a lot of writings for Seeking Alpha. As you could see during the progress of the interview, he's a great writer, and he doesn't waste people's time with print. He really has something to say when he writes something. So great work, Kirk. Thanks for all the pearls that you dropped here today and for keeping people opening their eyes and having them keep an open mind. So thanks again, buddy.
Yeah, take care.
All right, everyone, that's a wrap. Good hunting the rest of the day, and we'll see everyone tomorrow for investing.com Thursday. Good hunting, and most of all, don't just count your pips, count your blessings. See you warriors tomorrow, and don't forget, if you capitalized on the turnaround Tuesday trade yesterday, which is continuing today with the euro pushing up again, become part of our trading family. Adios.